So for our final show of the season, we decided to do the Midnight Gospel. I think that one of the reasons for this was it came out pretty recently. It only came out last month. And, it came out on the 20th of April. That makes a lot of sense. And it comes from Adventure Time creator Pendleton Ward. And whilst I've only seen a little bit of Adventure Time, I am a big fan of things like Steven Universe and that kind of brand of animation. And also it's a very visually interesting looking show. I'm going to be honest, I was not expecting what we got.
No,
because even as far back as last week when we were like, and next week we'll look at the Midnight Gospel, I'd only seen one, and that just left me very confused.
I hadn't even seen one at this point, and I'd maybe seen the teaser trailer, and I had no idea that it was a show about a podcast.
Yes, so this show was created by Pendleton Ward, the Adventure Time creator. He stood down as showrunner of Adventure Time. And it's basically he's teamed up with Duncan Trussell, who is a comedian, and Duncan Trussell has a podcast where he discusses philosophy and like life and death and all kinds of things with a variety of different guests. And it was Pendleton was listening to that podcast and decided it would make a good animated show.
They've repurposed the audio and built fairly loose but interesting stories around it, largely relying upon the sort of, as you said, the fantastic animation skills and the imagination of the creative team behind it.
So the all-encompassing question: what did you think? Did you like it?
I did.
I had no idea what I was watching at some points, but it was enjoyable.
I think it's a very good execution of its own idea, except for sometimes the podcast element of it, which takes up the sort of the middle act of the episode normally. Generally, there's a sort of loose plot at the beginning and the end, and bits scattered throughout the middle, but the middle is mostly the podcast. And sometimes I found the animation a little bit distracting.
Yes. No, that was my main like, it was generally difficult sometimes just to follow what they were talking about and also what was going on screen, because they were discussing some very deep, serious, deep, interesting issues, but then on screen you've got like clowns or something. Like, what?
Yes.
I honestly thought this was going to be... It's almost like you said about The Witcher last week. You thought it was going to be something you could have on in the background.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was like, no, I can't have this on in the background. I literally blinked and I don't know what they're talking about anymore.
I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it necessarily fails at its own objective because of that, because you can just about sort of pick up on the interesting things that people are saying. I would, if I was watching this again, I would concentrate more on that than the plot, because the plot it's quite loose.
Yes. I mean, the plot, it kind of feels like it doesn't really do much, honestly. Like, it just gradually strings the episodes together. There's no real stakes. It is just about listening to this podcast and going to these different worlds.
And I think it's impressive how they've crafted a narrative about throughout this. They must have gone back and got voices again that they'd done that they'd interviewed for the podcast to sort of link them into the story, I'm sure.
Yeah, and while looking at the just on Wikipedia, it seems there are 3 episodes 5, 6, and 7 aren't based off a podcast episode. They must have done those specifically. Okay, and those seem to be the ones with a bit more story behind them.
Yes,
but I wouldn't. Yeah, and even as simple as just the fact that obviously it was Duncan Trussell who would have done the podcast. Yeah. Obviously, the main character in this is called Clancy, and it is still just Duncan Trussell's voice. Yeah. But there are definitely bits where his guests say Clancy. Yeah. Apart from, obviously, the final episode, but we'll get to that.
Yes. Which I thought, again, I think the bookends of this series were probably the strongest for me, without getting into spoilers.
Without getting to... I thought the final episode was definitely the strongest. Yeah. The first episode, I don't know, maybe I just wasn't expecting it. Right, and as you almost acclimate to, okay, this is what this show is.
Yes. I think
becomes...
maybe that's why I liked it, is because it kind of really throws you in at the deep end.
Yeah.
But it works. I think it glues together and it works. And you know how I'm going to keep bringing this up as a sort of as a through plot of this series. But you know how I was saying last week with The Witcher, how it doesn't give any exposition before throwing you into the world, and I found that a bit intense. This I felt I got it just about straight away, like the world.
Yeah.
I think animation helps.
Almost animation helps you with that suspension of disbelief part of it.
Exactly. And you know, we haven't seen exactly this before, but we've seen things similar. I've written down on my notes here. If you've seen Rick and Morty, The Ricky Gervais Show, and Adventure Time, and you kind of blend that into one thing, then that's Midnight Gospel.
And again, this is something that we've mentioned about a few of the shows. This is another one. And as much as obviously we were like, hey, we're going to help you find something to binge, this is not a show to binge. This show, like, you text me earlier in the week, like, oh, thank God we're finishing on 8, like, 20-minute episodes.
Yeah.
But my God, some of these were so dense.
Yeah.
Like, some of these were more difficult to get through than some of the hour-long ones.
Yeah.
Because there was just so much to them. I had to be in, like, the right mindset and, like, the right... I just had... You know, you have to be feeling like you want to watch an episode of this.
Yeah, exactly. But, like, I mean, being short, it helps. Yes,
and definitely, if they were any longer, they would start to be a bit... Like, we were saying we're having difficulty following in the middle act, which is going to be about 15 minutes of its runtime, with its situations and its animation and stuff. Can you imagine trying to stretch that longer than it needed to be?
Oh, God.
You would just be like, okay, where are we now? What's happening? Who's doing what?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing. While you're trying to when you're trying to concentrate on the podcast, they move location and dimensions and all sorts whilst they're talking. But again, I think that it's a visual aid. It's not so much something. Concentrate. It's a podcast. I would say watch this as more of a podcast than as a plot thing, which I think is quite a difficult thing to initially do when you go into this series. And this is a really good podcast, and it's a really good show. I have a feeling that somewhere there is some person who is probably enjoying some weed somewhere who's now proclaiming this is the best show to ever exist. Because the first episode did definitely make me think, have I picked a stone that's a show for stoners? But the thing is, when you do listen to it, when you do pay attention, you do like let yourself just be immersed by it. It's very enjoyable. And I think they have they're very interesting debates with very interesting people as well. I don't think it's fair to just call it a stoner show, because I mean, even though the first episode was a discussion about drugs and it dropped. I think
that's what did it. Is like the first episode was about drug convictions,
and the original release date was on the 20th of the 4th.
Yeah, which apparently is Duncan Trussell's birthday.
But, no, where is it?
Yeah,
God.
But that's the thing. They're released on 4/20. The first episode is about drug convictions. I was like, oh God, is this just going to be like 7 more episodes of just chatter about how drugs are great whilst weird shit happens?
Yeah.
But no, it becomes very affecting. It's very interesting. And
the people are really interesting. Like, even though they kind of pitch them as... I mean, it's a good show. Like, I've said about like the distracting animations and stuff, but also it kind of helps it, because that first episode, it lands you in an alternative Earth where there's a zombie apocalypse, and Clancy visits a simulated man called Glasses Man, who's actually the president of this Earth.
Yes, but he's also like tiny.
He's tiny, and you see them sort of defend themselves against zombies as they're going on. But yeah, like it makes it funny for a start, which is good, and like it's an interesting subject who makes very interesting discussions. And I thought that about all the episodes. I don't know why, but I especially liked the episodes in this series. There's a couple of episodes about death and trauma and stuff like that, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated the topic matter, and also like you were saying about the animation helping. I think there is one that takes place in a prison, which I think is the ultimate exemplifier of that. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that some of the visuals in that were just like amazing.
Yeah.
And it was just and it's just good visual storytelling. I think other ones, the background stuff seemed a lot less connected to what was actually going on. And that was where it was definitely more difficult to actually stay with it. So almost the visual storytelling had to be at least somewhat interlinked with the topic, which happened in the prison one and happened in the finale.
I agree. I liked the ones where the animations kind of lead you to believe that the subjects and Clancy are both in sort of imminent threat, because it kind of, I don't know, it kind of helped sell the narrative to me. It's like, yeah, this is what people want to talk about. Like when they're faced with imminent threat, they want to talk about their real feelings and really interesting points.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm stalling. I've got nothing else to say.
Well, I was going to say let's do spoilers here. So,
but yeah, we'll say spoilers here, but we are using spoilers in inverted commas because it's a podcast.
Yeah, and I'd say you have to. This is a show where I'd want you to experience it for yourself. So if you haven't seen it, just look in the show notes and skip to the end of end of this podcast.
Okay. I would also argue though as well that like there's not that much to spoil, because I think you're watching this show for the discussion.
Yeah, the overarching story doesn't really matter as much.
No,
it was just and the only thing I'm going to go into spoilers for is the last episode.
Yeah,
but just because it feels like the one where it would take you the most by surprise.
Yes.
And that's not even for plot reasons, but it's kind of for some of the underlying stuff. So, episode 8, which is Mouse of Silver, is the guest, in inverted commas, is Duncan Trussell's late mother. So she actually passed away before I think the show even came out. And it is a very intense discussion about life and death. And honest to God, like, I had to watch this one during my lunch break today, because obviously we're all just working from home, but because I was like, I want to watch this in plenty of time before we have to talk about it. And my God, this one is just like almost probably like the most touching and most emotional.
Yeah.
You can almost feel it come off the animation as well as like the discussion.
Yeah. I agree.
And it's just so well done.
It's interesting because I think this hasn't got like a cast per se to this series, and yet in this final episode, it's the characters, inverted commas, are like feel so real, because they are, and that's something really unique about this series, is that in other series it's very difficult to write characters which feel like they're in a real relationship. Yeah. Or have a real relationship with each other, whereas this is obviously just like real recordings. So yeah, I agree, it did absolutely hit really hard, and not the direction you, as you said, expect it to take as a sort of trippy comedy stoner podcast.
And yeah, just like, and at the end when it's just and it ends obviously on a really really lovely note. He gets on a train or a bus which is just full of all his previous guests and people you've seen before. And he asks whether they're all dead, and the other person just says, "Just be here now." Yeah, which was just a culmination of everything that happened in that. Yeah, in the series, but specifically in that episode. Yeah, and it was just. I think you put it best when you said the Midnight Gospel is like the best version of what it's trying to be. Yeah, and it's trying to be this very strange, out there, unique thing, and I think that's really good.
Yeah, because that's the thing. There are episodes taken throughout years of this man's very personal life. In fact, they mentioned that in the episode as well. They said like, "Oh yeah, these viewers know everything," kind of thing. And yeah, you're right. You sort of you get an absolute image of Duncan Trussell's life in a series kind of thing, because it's taken throughout various points of his life and various emotional points of his life. And I think it is going to be a fantastic show. As much as I wish I didn't binge it in a week, but I think it's going to go on to become like a bit of a cult classic, because I think it's one of the most human shows I've seen in a while.
Do you think there should be any more?
I wouldn't be upset if there wasn't.
Yeah, that's kind of what is like, especially after that, how they ended it on that finale.
Yeah.
This almost seems like a passion project that's just obviously had just some good back into it.
If they leave it there, that is almost a guaranteed cult classic.
Yeah. It's going to be taught to students of animation, students of philosophy, students of writing,
Yeah.
It's just, it is almost the perfect version of itself, which is all you can really hope for.
Mm.
And my God, did we choose a strange show to end this on?
I feel like I've been on a journey.
Yeah, exactly.
We started on Good Omens, we ended on this, and everything in between.
But I think that's the good thing about what we've done. I think me and you were saying it during just when we had a little break before we started talking about this, is that I've seen a lot of shows that either I wouldn't have watched or would have taken me a lot longer to get to.
Yeah.
And whilst I definitely think there were some shows, some weeks where I didn't have as much time, where I was like, okay, better watch another one of these, it definitely was worth it. There were no shows I regretted watching.
And it's funny, because these are all one series shows, I mean, so far, obviously, but because all of some of these are one and done shows, I kind of feel like we've experienced a lot of people's stories in this last few weeks.
Yeah. And I think this was a good idea.
Yeah.
I can't remember whose idea it was, but good job whoever it was.
It was definitely you.
Oh, stop it. But no, it's been a good few shows, and I'd recommend anyone who's been listening along with us, if you've not seen any of the shows, go back and watch just all of them.